And yeah, very well. It's recording.
Okay, thank you, Akshay, and thank you, Fiona and Ellie, and thank all of you who've had this group and this discussion for all this time. And I didn't know that people were doing that, but I think when I found out, I thought this is a great discussion and a very important one. Uh, we're still in Alexandria, Virginia, so Akshay told the truth, but we moved across town. What's today? Yesterday, no, day before yesterday, and we unpacked as best we could yesterday. So you see, we've made some progress. My husband's very quick. You know, we get in the house and he suddenly starts putting art up. He's an art historian, so he doesn't wait, right? And so Elwood has already made himself at home. You can see Elwood behind me, I think. You see he's on the sofa there. That's our Springer Spaniel, sound asleep. And then on the floor is our big old lab, Jimmy, who is kind of out of the picture there. Oh, there he is. You can sort of see him. José is with a boarder because although she loves chaos, the parrot, there all this going on fumes that we were afraid to have her here. So she'd cause a lot of trouble. Anyway, but we're here and we made it. And so I'm delighted. I feel like I'm in England. It's raining and dark and dreary out there. Uh, and you have more than Scotland. We travel in Scotland. Half the day would be like this, and then half the day would be sunny. And so we're kind of doing that today here in Alexandria. I am very happy to be with you all. And if you want, I see somebody ask a full screen. You can just go to view up there and you can choose speaker, and then you'll have big me, or you can keep it on gallery and see everybody. It's up to you. And as Fiona said, I certainly want to leave plenty of time for questions or answers or comments. So that will come. I'm overwhelmed by this move, so so it's probably easier for me to get out of the way today and let Baba come through than it would ordinarily be, because there's not much of me left after all this. So I'm a diminished person, but Baba is never diminished, and so he'll do what he wants to do. That was a joke, Ellie. Although not entirely a joke. All right, so let's see. You all have been discussing intuition, some of you at least in that group, and so you have more expertise at this and what Baba has said than probably anyone else, including myself. But I wanted to share with you, as Fiona mentioned, a particular aspect of intuition. I guess you would say that's what it is. The definitions of these words, you know, are very fluid, and people have different definitions. So I'm not going to try to define all of them, but I think that many people, many philosophers who talk about conscience are sometimes refer to it as moral intuition. That may be helpful, just to kind of place it in the world of intuition or definitions of intuition. Moral intuition, or people of faith in the United States, and I guess around the world, we have a long history of thinking of our inner voice as, what do you say, the voice of conscience, the voice that sort of guides us as to what we should do or should not do. And that there's many faith groups, of course, have the conviction that every human being has that dimension, right? Has that part in themselves to know what is required of them by God or by their higher being. And in fact, much of I'm a religious freedom scholar, and so a lot of what I look at and deal with are questions of conscience. You know, what is someone's claim of conscience as opposed to something they want to do. And that makes a huge difference in this country legally, right? I mean, if it's a legitimate claim of conscience under our Constitution, it's given a much higher protection than just, this is what I want to do. Let me give a very simple example. You know, if a young lady wants to wear her hijab to our public school, we call state-supported schools public schools, and or a young man wants to wear his yarmulke. But you know, there is in that school a no head covering policy, right? Nobody can wear a head covering. But they are not, they don't want to wear the head covering necessarily because they like it or want to, or maybe some of them do, but they do believe in the way they have grown up and their conscience has been shaped that this is something they must do, right? They feel it's a requirement of God. Sometimes they feel it inwardly strongly, and sometimes it's, of course, upbringing. But whatever the influences are on their claim of conscience, that's what it is. And another boy or another young lady might want to wear, you know, their favorite football team hat or baseball or, you know, or something else. And they're told they can't do it, but this girl over here can wear her hijab, and this boy over here can wear his yarmulke. So that's a simple illustration of how in this country we make a distinction between a claim of conscience, and of course it gets much more interesting and sophisticated as we talk about other aspects of life. We make a distinction between a claim of conscience where people feel this is what I must do, as opposed to this is what I want to do or don't want to. And in fact, as we know from the movie Pinocchio, we often, you know, want to do things and our conscience tells us, no, you can't do that. So in other words, I think everybody here probably has daily experience, as I do, of this conflict between conscience and what we might want to do ourselves. So this is a familiar topic, I think, to all of us. I'll have to confess, I never thought much about it beyond, you know, what I think most of us feel. And, you know, growing up with Meher Baba and some of his close ones here in the West, I didn't think about that distinction too much. Of course, I wanted to do what I felt Baba wanted me to do. Um, you know, but it didn't seem too difficult to discern that in some ways. And I was surrounded by people who were exemplars of living a life that would please Baba. Elizabeth Patterson. And I just, when I mention names, I just want to make sure, I think everyone here probably knows exactly who I mean, but just to say, she was one of Meher Baba's, of course, closest Western disciples, and with Princess Norina Machiavelli, co-founded, well, Baba founded, but started the center in Myrtle Beach that Baba asked them to locate and to create, Meher Spiritual Center. So Elizabeth lived with Baba in India in the 30s in the ashram, and Baba called her his rock, means he could always depend on her, you know, for anything. And she always was immediate in whatever Baba wanted. It could be anything. She gave everything to him. And so much so that Mani, Baba's sister, took me aside one day in India, must be 80s, 70s, I'm not sure. And she said, you know, Charles, because our family is very close to Mani, my mother was kind of like Mani's sister, Jane was, and through Elizabeth, of course. And Elizabeth was our link to Meher Baba. She told my mother about her, and that's how we met Baba in 1958, is through Elizabeth. Anyway, Mani took me aside and said, you know, Charles, we had a nickname for your Auntie Boo, which is what I called Elizabeth Auntie Boo growing up. she said, we had a nickname for her. And I said, oh, what was that? And she said, we used to say, Elizabeth, her nickname is Yes, Baba dear. What a wonderful thing to be remembered for. Yes, Baba dear, because every time Baba would ask her anything, it was immediate. It was immediate, and no one was quite like this around Baba. Monty said, this is so spontaneous and immediate. It didn't matter what it was. Yes, Baba dear. And so that was Elizabeth, and I grew up around her. And of course, uh, as I say, she just sort of lived and breathed. This is what Baba would have us do. She didn't tell us this is what Baba would have us do. She never said, Baba wants this or Baba, she just did what she knew inside. Would please him as best she could. And Kitty Davy, of course, that extraordinary disciple who Meher Baba left in Myrtle Beach in 1952 after she had spent, almost 20 years in India living in the ashram to help Elizabeth and Norina, which she did. And then she remained there. She always thought Baba would call her back to India, but he didn't. And she spent the rest of her life there, much to the delight of, I guess, thousands of young people who started coming in the 60s, for whom Kitty was a tremendous source of joy, fun, wisdom, all of it. And she was the archetypal servant, means she didn't think about serving people or Baba. She just breathed that. By the time I met her, I think by the time I met Elizabeth and Kitty as a child, I think I met them when I was 7, as a year before Baba came. I looked back and later realized, I was meeting Baba then, or as close to it as you can in human form. I didn't think of it until later, but I was meeting Baba because they were transparent to Baba by that time. If there was any Elizabeth ego or Kitty ego left, boy, you'd have to take, a microscope to find it. They never gave a thought to themselves, and they didn't try not to. That was the amazing thing. And I didn't realize this, of course, until much later. It was just who they were, and that was why for a year they didn't talk about Baba. They didn't give me anything to read, but when Meher Baba came and I had my own experience of him, looking back, I realized the preparation for that meeting Baba gave me, the great blessing of being around people who were so transparent to him. But I want to be clear, because this sometimes gets misunderstood. They were very much Kitty and Elizabeth, and very different people, different personalities, different humor, and different eccentricities. Baba loved the personalities, you see. I mean, he kept them. He exaggerated them sometimes, and then he would use them for his work. What Baba was getting rid of, without them even thinking about it or knowing it, was, of course, the false self. He wasn't getting rid of a Kitty personality, thank goodness, because she kept us with joy every day. She kept us with joy. So I'm sorry, my dog is going to bark when people come in the door. So I'm going to be. Sorry, I'm back. Elwood hears anything and he's off. So that is all what, by way of background to what I'm going to share with you today from my heart. It really comes from seeing people live it and inspired me to try to live it. I don't know. I mean, how how Baba did it, but he does it differently in each person. But he certainly showed me how he does it through them. Um, I growing up with them, and of course with my mother Jane, who's another great, I say, just not just because she's my mother. I think she was a great disciple of Meher Baba's. Much different personality, much more like Norina Machabelli, who I didn't know personally, but got to know so well through her papers and through Elizabeth. Mother was Jane was very dramatic and, bigger than life kind of personality. And Baba wore her down too. Kept Jane, the personality, but wore her down. I've seen it with everyone who's been with Baba any length of time. As Baba says, my only yoga is you go, I come. and, and that's pretty much life with Baba. You go, he comes, and that's it. And anything you want to cling to, well, cling while you may, because he'll get it eventually. And Baba, my whole life with Baba has been a pattern as maybe many of you have experienced too, of a losing. It's a losing game, right? You think you've given this up, and then suddenly there's something else and something else. Baba keeps going. Why? Because he loves us so. It's his love is so great that he wants us to be free, to be who we really are. Of course, and who we really are is none other than Baba himself. So let me just, as a way of example of this particular topic, give a kind of tough example, if you don't mind. I always sort of think, we don't want to sort of make everything sound like it isn't easy. Losing ego isn't easy. Finding him as our true self is not easy. It goes well if we put him first and hold on to his Dhamma, but it's not smooth or easy. And everybody who's been around Baba any length of time is probably nodding inside right now, because it's true. But one of the most important crossroads in my life, a defining time in my life, came in 1994. And some of you know pieces of this story. I am not going to tell the whole story because it's a different story. But it's the only way I have into this topic that really sharpens, I think, how at least I became aware of the meaning of conscience in life with Baba, which I hadn't really thought too much about. I mean, by 1994, I had been with Meher Baba for, I don't know, whatever years, 58 to 94. I was a grown-up. But I just didn't think, maybe I took it for granted. Funny, I went into a career where I was defending the freedom of conscience for people all over the place, people I didn't agree with too, but that's not the point. The point is not to agree with someone else's claim of conscience or their deep conviction, but they have the right to it, unless they interfere with the rights of other people. But short of that, they have every right to follow what their God requires. Even if they're a church of one, our courts, interestingly enough, recognize they have that right, even if everyone else in their congregation or community says, oh, no, that's reading scripture wrong. And this person says, no, that's what I believe God wants. In the court, they have standing to say, this is what my conscience tells me. So it's interesting. So I chose that as a career. And then in 1994, I kind of realized, well, this is a very serious matter, This is no wonder through the ages, there has been so much focus on the freedom to follow the dictates of one's conscience, because you see, it's not just, again, following what you want to do. It's following what you are required to do by your God. And I've personally finally experienced something of that, taste of that. So that's why I'm sharing this particular story. I'm not telling the whole story, but I'm giving you the bare bones of the story, because we don't have all day for my stories. And the simple thing is about what happened, and many of you know this. Christopher, my husband, and I, at the time we'd been together maybe 5-6 years, we considered ourselves married, even though it wasn't legally possible at that time. We've subsequently become legally married, but that was years later. In 1994, however, we felt we were, but and we didn't stop to think that maybe we should have probably, that others in our Meher Baba family would think, oh no, that's different, and that's not what Baba would want, that's not real marriage, and so forth and so on. I don't know why. I think I got lulled into thinking everyone was on the same page about love and relationships, because Baba's family is very loving generally. There are all these issues back and forth, but it's loving at heart, and people do care for one another. So I never thought about it too much. But one day in 1994, a group of board members, Meher Spiritual Center board members, came to my home, which is called Meher House. It's directly across from Meher Baba's house, for those of you who haven't been to the center. So you can look out our window and you see the fence around Baba's house. Elizabeth the board gave us, but Elizabeth arranged for us to have a life estate on that property. So that's where we built our home, and where Wendy and I grew up, and means it's ours until we die, and then it goes back to the center. It's a life estate. Baba approved it and blessed it. He also actually, interestingly enough, said that my name should go on the deed as well as my mother. I suppose that's because they thought, Baba thought, when Jane leaves, then one of the children will still have rights to stay in their home for their lifetime. Wendy and John are welcome as well to live there, but one of us had to be on the deed, I guess, and it was me. Baba said, me. So there it was, 1994. We had been there a long time. My mother was still alive. She was away when they came over. I think if she had been in town, this might have unfolded differently. Elizabeth and Kitty were gone. And again, the sense of authority that they had, not because they asserted authority, but just because Baba placed them there, and their years with him and their wisdom, people deferred to them. But they weren't there. They weren't there. Reminds me of what Mani said once to me. She said, Charles, I'm trying to get all this done, how things should be at the tomb, how this and that. And she said, you know why I'm rushing to do all this? And I said, no, Mani, why? She said, because after I'm gone, it will, all chaos, people will want this, they will want that. So she said, while I'm here, she said, but to me, it's like holding back the dike, the finger in the dike metaphor, because it's all going to break. So that's how it was with Elizabeth. You see, when she left, things began to crumble. They didn't accept Jane, my mother, in the same way, you see, in that role, even though Baba had asked Mother to go to the center to help Kitty and Elizabeth. So Mother had been placed there by Baba himself in his physical lifetime. But after Elizabeth went, that didn't carry a lot of weight with some people, right? Anyway, the board members came to my house. I was on the board, so we were fellow board members. My mother was chair of the board and president of the center. So, and they said that there were people in the community, they wouldn't tell us who didn't feel, who were opposed to Christopher and I moving into Mayor House. Because our plan at that point had been Mother was in such need of help and support that we would move there to help her, and she would be next door in her little art studio and let us live in the house. So seems simple enough plan. But when just before we moved, this happened. And uh, all of you know this. With Baba, he doesn't, I mean, he gives clues that this is what he's doing. Just enough so that you get the fragrance of his hand in it and don't despair about it, right? We've all, I think, with Baba experienced this. And Baba lets us know, you know, so this little glimpse that don't worry. This is Baba. Don't worry. It's all mine. But it's a glimpse. So the day they came to my house, I was giving a talk that night on meeting Baba because it was my anniversary of meeting Baba in 58, May 21st. Interestingly enough, it was also Christopher's anniversary of first coming to the center in 1988 and meeting my mother and falling in love with Baba in the bar on May 21st, it's 1987, excuse me. So that was a double anniversary for us, and it became a triple one because of this event. May 21st became a triple anniversary. And they said, these people feel very deeply, homosexuals will betray the center. It will bring more homosexuals to the center. It will, it's bad for the atmosphere. It's a disobedience to Baba and so forth and so on. So now the board members weren't necessarily saying they agreed with this. We found out later one of them actually not only agreed with it, was kind of like the architect of the argument that homosexuality was so offensive to Baba that this would not be allowed. Now, some of them, the people who were raising these objections, claimed that had nothing to do with it for themselves. It was all about, it would hurt the center and the community, the wider Myrtle Beach community. It struck me later, I think, well, that's an interesting argument, and that has some weight. People in South Carolina in 1994, yeah, probably would have been a bit, if they had ever found out that two men in a relationship were living at this house, which wasn't actually part of the center, but it was on the edge of the center. It was used by my mother to meet with people. It had a real role in the center's life. So I understood that, but I thought, that's an interesting argument in South Carolina because not long before that, at one time in South Carolina, if an interracial couple had moved in, there would have been some greater outrage. It was illegal for Black and white man and woman to marry in South Carolina, I guess in the 60s. Or what if a Jewish couple moved in and there was a lot of some in the community felt, oh my God, not the Baba community, but the wider community, Jews at mayor, this, So, I mean, but when it came to us, apparently it was a different matter, and for this group of people, I'll say there were a minority of people around the world. It became worldwide, and so I won't go into any more because that's enough to give you the pain of it and and what it did in my life in that day forward began to shatter so much that I had built up about not only the Baba community, but Baba himself. And of course, at first, I was so stunned that I didn't know what to make of it. And I also wanted to hear them. My whole career has been finding common ground between people of differences. And the first rule of finding common ground, of course, is you really try to put your big ears on. And with Baba, you try to open your ears of your heart and you want to know why do they feel this way? What is it, you know? And and as one of my great professors said when I was in seminary, he used to say, uh, you know, he said, he was Swedish. He said, well, just remember about fundamentalists. And we all, and at Harvard Divinity School, you'd laugh when people talk about fundamentalism. I didn't laugh, but people did. And he would admonish the students, and he'd say, no, he said, what if they are right? Yeah, what if they're right? Always keep that open. So I did, you know, in spite of my hurt, my pain, my shock, I, I thought, well, what if they are right? Let me, and so I struggled with it. And there were some among that number who were close to Baba. And I'd always admired. Not many. There were some, including in India, you know, very conservative country on this issue, naturally speaking. And of course, they thought they understood what Baba would want, just as I thought I did in my life. You know, people have their own view, and this is what Baba wouldn't want this. Baba would be unhappy and all this. It would hurt his center and so forth. And they had felt that deeply. Um, Most other people in this country, in the United States at least, were on the other end of it. They thought, of course, this is love and so forth. You know, I mean, they didn't, even in 19 Baba people were very supportive of us being there. They knew that Elizabeth would hoped one day I would be there. They knew that Bob had put my name on the deed. You know, that was their view. So it was a split, you know, a deep split. And but I thought about the people who were close to Meher Baba. Some, as I say, some among his closest people in India, a few. Uh, you know, I thought, well, if they feel that way, are they right? Uh, you know, are they right? And I had to give it, you know, contemplate it, think about that. It was a very painful thing, especially when there's a letter that came from some of those folks with powerful names on the letter to my mother, ostensibly, but it was circulated widely to the board and others. And that, of course, generated a lot of controversy and upset in the broader Baba community, that letter. Meanwhile, Erich and Mani, even though personally they probably didn't get, I mean, Erich and Mani probably had very conservative views themselves on some of these sexual issues. But you know, they were the kinds of disciples like Kitty and Elizabeth who just whatever their personal feelings, they would sort of go to the 30,000 feet level with Baba and see what maybe they were limited in their view, you know, and be open. Not necessarily know and decide, but, you know, be open. And also, Erich and Mani, particularly, I was very close to them. They loved me very much. And they, as much as anybody in the world except Elizabeth, shaped who I am as a person with Baba. So naturally, you know, this was hard for them, this split and this issue, but they stood up for us and for Jane. And of course, Mani was deeply, well, she was very close to my mother, Jane. They were like sisters. They had the same birthday. They were, from the very beginning, when we first contact with Baba, Baba had Mani be the person right to our family and so forth. There's the contact. And, you know, we were her family, and like we were Elizabeth's family. And so Mani stood up, you know, and that helped a great deal. But still, the conflict was there, the pain was there with people I admired. So what to do, and there is the crisis of conscience. You know, Baba says this, Baba says that. We were hearing. Yeah, he did. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, he did. He said that. 1930, he said this. 1942, he's, you know, like that. And then I had to say, well, wait a minute. what is Baba saying in myself? Who is my Baba? Not who is so-and-so in India's Baba, or these folks in our community who were really angry. I mean, I won't go into it, but they were really angry and showed it. They have their own Baba, you know. Well, what about mine? Is theirs my Baba? Doesn't feel like it. My Baba is it? I don't feel like the, I don't even feel like the close disciples or, you know, whatever. They have a monopoly on Baba. And I began to think about that. What does my Baba say? What is my, you know, what is right to do for me, not necessarily for everybody else, and for Christopher? I did know this. Elizabeth used to tell me growing up, Charles, give in, give in, give in on everything unless it's a spiritual principle. And I didn't quite know what she meant, but I discovered it. And in this case, I realized anyone who says that my marriage and my relationship to my husband is a betrayal of Baba or perverse or hurts the center, I know that that's a principle deep in my heart that I cannot just give in on. If all the angels descended from heaven and said, you're wrong, you know, I mean, that's a spiritual principle, at least I felt. So the conflict was deep. Whose Baba are we dealing with? The Baba in the various discourses quoted to me, the Baba, you know, like that. I don't know if you've ever had a crisis like this, but this is my greatest one to that point. Well, yeah, it was. What does Baba want me to do? And here's where Baba also, like May 21st, Baba kind of, you know, I mean, I don't know. It felt later, this is how Baba, his hand is there, you know. I'm standing in my room at Mayor House, which has now become seen as the den of iniquity by, by some people. I'm standing in my room in Mayor House, and I'm just thinking of this, and I'm looking up at the shelves, and I see these pamphlets are there that Elizabeth had given me years ago, the originals, you know, early days, this and that, gems, and this thing that were printed by Warren Healy, you know, old pamphlets. You know, nobody really read them anymore or whatever. And so just because I was standing there, I just pulled one off the shelf. I thought maybe something in here, give me something of Baba's, you know. And it was Sayings of Meher Baba. It was a little blue booklet, long, long out of print. Sayings of Meher Baba. Printed, I think, first in maybe first and only in 1930 something, 1, 2, 3, early 30s by Westerners. Sayings of Meher Baba. So I didn't really recognize it. I don't know that. I mean, I can't ever remember reading it. So I open it up. And now the story is like Hafez is used in Persia, you know, and Iran. It's like people just open it up to, and there's the answer. So it sounds like one of those stories. But and people actually do it every day. But this was like I'd never done that before. Wasn't looking for an answer anyway. I opened the pamphlet, a little flimsy pamphlet, maybe 30 pages. And this is what I read there. And I've never seen this before from Bob. I've never seen anything even like this before. This is what I read there. Do nothing, even to please me or the world, against the dictates of your own conscience. Unhesitatingly do what you think to be right and proper, despite the opposition of the world. Let your mind be as firm as a rock that resists strong blasts of wind from all sides. And in that moment, everything changed for me. That was, I would say, a defining moment in my life. Because here is Baba pointing the way to know what he wants for me, not for you, not for the next person, not for the people who didn't like us living there. They have their own conscience. They have their own way of identifying what Baba wants. And that's, as I understand Meher Baba, that's exactly the way it's supposed to be for Baba. Baba is in everyone, after all. He's not just in me or Elizabeth or Mani, he's in the other people as well. So whatever the love dynamic requires, the lover-beloved dynamic requires, it at heart requires that we have our own connection to the beloved in ourselves that may be unlike anyone else's. And this tested that for me and made me aware that I needed to listen to what my conscience means, the voice of Baba in me is saying. Conscience can be defined many ways, but if you're one is a lover of the beloved, it is where the voice of the beloved is found. And actually, Carl Jung, who I studied and found very helpful in my life with Baba, Carl Jung used to talk, I can't quote him exactly, but he also talk about conscience as really the voice of God. Now, when he used God, he meant the archetype God. He meant the archetype of the self, which is a little different, but not too different. Yeah. It's where the self speaks. It's where the self speaks. And it may speak in a way, Baba in ourselves, our God in ourselves, or whatever you want to call it, may speak in a way that no one else has heard. And of course, that's been the death of any number of people over the centuries. You know, they're listening to the voice within, and then, you know, they can often die for it. And you know what? They are ready to die rather than betray that voice or that conscience. And conscience is the deepest commitment. Voice of conscience, following that is the deepest commitment a human being can have. You know, you can follow scriptures, you can follow rituals, you can follow feelings, your intuitions in various ways. But boy, the capacity to follow what your God is saying, conscience, that is the greatest human capacity. And it's also the most powerful shaper of life if one cultivates it. I found out recently that reading the Tiflin lectures that have come out, which are extraordinary, Ward Parks and others have given us such a gift in bringing out all of these early discourses of Baba. They're just such a joy. And this recent one of all the lectures he gave to the high school students, the Prem Ashram students, oh, it's such a wonderful thing to read how Baba taught those young people, using a slate at the beginning, no less. But I found out that Baba gave what I just read to you then in 1926. It's a little different form. So by the time they put it in sayings, they, you know, reduced it and put it as a saying. But there's actually a lecture surrounding these ideas in this book of lectures that Baba gave to his close ones at Meherabad. 1926, he'd only been silent a year. I think it was May 1926. He hadn't been silent even a year. And he was using a slate to give these messages. Can you imagine? Baba's writing on the slate, someone else is, taking it down, and then it gets wiped off, and it's amazing that that's how he communicated. So that's where this came from. This is one of the very earliest things Baba ever gave. I thought it was kind of shocking, actually. I don't know why. I just thought, what? Do nothing even to please me? I'd always been told, oh, pleasing Baba, that's everything. Well, it is, but this is what pleases him. It pleases him to do nothing even to please me against the dictates of your own conscience. As Baba explains in more of the lecture, he says, well, if your conscience says, I am not, this, I think he used Satguru, don't follow me. Because that's what I would want. If it says I am, follow me. That's what I would want. Baba doesn't want people going against what they deeply believe to be true. So, of course, this is a bigger picture than that's my little piece of it. I should tell you at least the end of the story, because you're all kind of wondering, poor Charles, what happened to he and Christopher? Well, in a sense, Baba made it clear that that we could have stayed there. We did not leave because we were forced out. Most people supported us, including most of the board. But I feel, Christopher felt, Jane felt, yeah, no, this is not, this division and all that, Baba doesn't like, or wanted. So my mother resigned from the board after 14 years of leading the center after Elizabeth's death. And so following that, I said, all right, I will too. So then Christopher and I were free. We could stay. It's our home after all. They can't say it's not our home. Baba himself approved the deed. Someone said, well, Baba didn't know that he was going to bring Christopher. I think, well, that's an interesting idea. Baba, who says, I know your whole past, I know your present, I know your whole future, didn't know. Well, I think probably he did. So, I mean, that's my idea. What I've gathered from Baba is he knew perfectly well. And he had a bigger work, you see. I mean, bigger than Meher Baba, Erich told me in a private message during this time. He said, tell Charles, Meher Baba says that Meher Baba's work is greater than Meher Baba. Means the universal work of changing consciousness is greater than any idea we have of Baba. And no one can limit Baba that way by saying, oh no, this is what he means. This is what he means. Elizabeth told me growing up, she said, Charles, in your life, people will try to limit Baba. But she said, but remember this, no one can limit Baba. Remember that. So all of that is to say, I felt, yes, I can keep helping the center this way or that way. And I have until this very day. I'm on this committee and that committee. But no, I don't have to be there full time. And my sister's living in that home now with her husband, Wendy and Buzz, and they had doing great service to the center. In fact, Buzz is now the president of the center, like my mother was. So there you go. That was destiny, you see, Baba's plan. But there's a greater plan. And since 1994, everything has changed. everything for LGBTQ people. I mean, it's still a long way to go, but look what Baba has done in a short time. I say, look what he's done. Some would say, no, that's anti-Baba. That's the Kali Yuga, all these homosexuals coming out, or transgender people. What's that? So I get it that there are different views, but I think most people connected with Meher Baba feel, as I do, and Christopher does, that all the transformation of consciousness that has changed life for LGBTQAI plus people is part of this advent of the greatest avatar in this cycle of time. Nothing like this. Thousands of years of oppression, nothing like this has happened, and especially overnight, in a blink. Did Christopher and I, was Baba using what happened to Christopher and I to advance this? Probably so. Not because of who we are, but because he works through people connected with him. Did he want us to go through this and not fight back? Yes, he did. Did he want us to let go of, whatever we thought it should be? Yes, he did. Did he want us to stand on principle and say, this is what I feel Baba would want? Yes. And that we did. We didn't do the other things because why? Let people fight. It doesn't matter, right? We don't want to do that. It didn't feel like Baba's way. So anyway, by his grace, I should say, because if you think I was strong, I wasn't, but I asked for Baba to help, and he did. He gave me the grace. He gave my mother the grace. And she ended up being freer in her life than she'd ever been before. After all this suffering, I won't go through the things that she went through, the humiliations, but I will say she got ill soon after this with pancreatic cancer, and so she didn't live long after this happened. She died in 97. But by the time she died, what great freedom Baba had given her. I don't mean just to do what she wanted. I mean free to be herself, her true self. Ah, what a gift. I'm not saying that all of this was for good. It's not for good or for bad. It just is. And Baba is changing consciousness. I don't think it's, people shouldn't do mean things to other people. Baba wouldn't like it, but Baba uses it. So, we don't have to say, oh, it's all good what this person did or that person did. It's not all good, but it is that people have their role. Judas had a role, Peter had a role, everybody had a role in the drama, and that was given to them. And they did follow what they felt inside. So we did. These other people who opposed us, they followed what they felt. Baba works through that. I'm just saying. And it was all a great gift to me. I'm not trying to make light of anyone's suffering, including my own. It was real, but what a gift in the end to be free, to follow my Baba. The Baba I thought I understood was shattered. And in that moment, I suppose the one could either let go of the Daman because, well, if this is Baba, I'm out of here. Or Baba can give you the grace to hold on and find him in a new way. Not the final way, but a new and deeper way, you see, because the final way is only going to be when he shows himself as he really is. And that's all from him. But my Baba now is quite different from my Baba before 1994. Quite different. So anyway, that's the end of that story. Now, of course, conscience is shaped by many things, you know. In every human being. In fact, it's shaped by the unconscious. It's shaped by, it's lifetimes and lifetimes if one follows what Baba has given. So there's a lot that goes into any individual conscience. So we know that. But in this lifetime, when we're connected by his grace, he lets us glimpse that he is who he is, at least gives us the conviction that he is who he is. The recognition that Meher Baba is actually the avatar. I mean, he gives that, and he only gives it only comes from him. If somebody experiences that what I've gathered from Baba, it's his. He did it. So, but if we have that conviction given to us, then it is for us to shape our conscience in life with Baba. And, we do, and we may not think of it this way, but we do. We read these various books that he's given or some other people have given. We have many influences. In my case, I was so blessed. The Mandali people, each in their own extraordinary way, shaped who I am in my conscience because they gave me clues as to his ways. They gave me, what do you say, his fragrance, right? I mean, that's Baba. Recognition, so being around them, listening to them, living with, of course, two of them, Elizabeth and Kitty, and I would count Jane. Baba said Jane was in his closest of circles. He told her that. So I was fortunate to have her as my mother. And I didn't feel that on some days, but but I now feel that's true. His words, everything Baba gave, all these discourses and all that, just like his words suddenly spoke to me in a way they hadn't before in that 1994. Well, his words are very powerful. Images of him, we've never had that before. Elizabeth took many of them. And after she left India in 1941 and came to found the center with Norina and Nadine Tolstoy, she stopped taking pictures. But when she was in India, she took many, many pictures of Baba. I don't think she ever took another photograph, including when Baba came to the center. I think she was done. But we have them. We have these images. We have film. Oh my gosh, film of this avatar walking around. And then the places. Mayor Spiritual Center in Myrtle Beach is full of his presence and beauty. People experience that, not just me, but many people. Meherazad, of course, Baba's own Samadhi, which is such a treasure, and so forth and so on. But these are only clues to Baba. You know this. They are not Baba. The discourses aren't Baba. Sometimes they're contradictory. Early discourses say one thing about this issue. Other discourses say a little different. Different people at different times got different instructions. And yeah, they're not Baba, as precious as they are. They are clues to Baba, in my view. This is now what I gather from Erich, from Elizabeth. They're clues. His close ones, Erich was very clear about this. This was Mani, to deflect any sense that, this is Baba speaking to you, or I'm speaking for Baba, or what. No, Erich always would, you remember this, who knew him and sat with him, he would almost always say, yeah, this is what I have gathered. This is what I have gathered. He never said, oh, this is what you should believe about. No. Elizabeth never, in my hearing, invoked Baba's authority. She was given authority over the center completely, but she never invoked it. She never says, Baba says this, Baba wants you to do that. So I had great models, you know. So these are all clues to Baba, who is, who is? He says, I am you. These are clues to who you are. Take them. They will help you to recognize me in you. If if we, to use the old Zen image, you know, if we mistake these fingers pointing to the moon for the moon, then of course we miss the moon. We're all caught up in, well, in this discourse, he said, and then, oh, there are different versions of the discourse. You know, there's the one in 1930 says this, and I don't know, on page, I mean, I'm not, it's wonderful if people are interested in that and they do that. I don't want to make fun, but I'm just saying it's never been of interest to me. I don't really understand how to get interested in, you know, this version or that version. Because what is it? It's certainly not Baba. When he comes again, he's going to give completely different discourses. He'd probably give a different cosmology, you know, knowing him, because it's all ignorant. We're all in ignorance. So in our ignorance, Baba gives us what we need right now, you know. But what do we need right now? What do we need it? We need only clues to find him as ourself. Because the only reason he came is to awaken himself in us through love. He didn't come to give discourses. He didn't come, as I say, I have come not to teach but to awaken is so important in what he said that he had it, it's engraved on his tomb. So no, these are not Baba. And people, you know, let people believe what they want. Interpret Baba in many, many, many ways. Wonderful. God save us from having it, you know, some Vatican defining how Baba did this and that, you know, whatever. Maybe it will come someday. But Baba didn't want it. Baba didn't want it. Let people. Baba did say to us in 1962, I remember this, when the question came up of these new discourses that would be published. It became the Everything and the Nothing, which is my favorite book about with Baba's words. They became the Everything and the Nothing, and Baba said, "Yes, I'm giving this, and you know it's going to be published in Australia and all that." And then Baba said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, he said, "You know," Baba said, "each of you is free to interpret my words as you think best. But do one thing before you speak about it. Say, this is my interpretation. Can you do that?" Yes, Baba. So yeah, these are the clues that we have, and all of this shapes our conscience, obviously. So my conscience isn't just, you know, whatever I feel about Baba. It's been shaped by all these factors and these influences. And can I trust it? No, it's going to get wrong. It gets things wrong sometimes, but I can trust that he is me because he says that's the truth that you have to always remember. I am who you really are. Trust that means trust me. Don't worry. You'll get it wrong, but trust me. So I know I'm going over, so let me just say here, give one more story or illustration, a short one, that I think helps sharpen this question, because people would come to Erich, and many of you know this story, you may have heard it from Erich himself, or read it because it's subsequently been published, fortunately. People came to Erich, Westerners would come, Easterners would come and say, you know, what should we do? How do we know what Baba wants for us to do? Baba's left the form after all. We can't ask him. Let me just say about that long before Baba left his physical body, in 1958, 59, 60, 61, Baba weaned us from getting directions or answers from him in India. Even Elizabeth, who had direct line to India, even in the deepest of seclusions, she was always the exception, she and Norina. They could always ask Baba. Even she would begin to get messages and answer to her question, or what should I do about this or that? And Baba would send back, do what you feel is best. Yeah, and I'll help you, I'll be there. But do what you feel is best. And he's in the form. So by the time he left his form, we were used to that. Elizabeth was even used to it. Right? Giddy. Anyway, so Erich would get this question. What do we do? What do we do now? What do we do now? So Erich told this story, among other things. It's a story that a short thing, incident at Meherazad. Baba had retired to his room one night and was getting ready to go to sleep or rest. I don't think he slept very much, to rest. And Erich was sitting outside, watchman that night. This was Meherazad. Baba was at the room Pindu lived in. So this must have been some special period of seclusion. And, so he was not over on the women's side. And Erich sitting under the tree, like that. And Baba told Erich, before he went to lie down, he said, not to disturb him for any reason, not to enter his room, unless Baba clapped. And then Erich was supposed to go right immediately to see what he wanted. So Erich says, that was very straightforward. There's no confusion in my mind about what I should do or not do. So I stayed outside the room and just waited for Baba's clap. That's all. But as he was sitting there, he felt something kind of crawl over his leg, and he saw it was a snake, poisonous snake, and it was heading towards Baba's room. And so this is how Erich put it. He told me the story, but when it got written down, it was much, so I don't have to try to remember. I can tell you that this is written down now. He said, Erich says, I rushed forward, and with my flashlight, I managed to pin the snake's tail just as it was disappearing under the crack of the door. Only the tail was left outside Baba's room, but he held it down with his flashlight, so it couldn't get completely inside. And Erich said he knew that Baba's bed was just inside the door to the right, and that the snake was only inches from Baba's bed, you see. So he was holding the tail with his flashlight, knowing that the snake was inches from Baba's bed. And he said, I must have made some noise because Baba clapped. Now what to do? Baba's order was that when he clapped, I was to drop everything and rush into his room. Erich said, Baba hadn't told me, when I clap, drop everything unless there's a snake or something. No, this was his order. And Erich said it was a very specific order, but he said, my first responsibility, he said, I felt, was to kill the snake. And he says, what happens if you hold the tail of a snake? It curls back around to attack the person that's holding it. And so he had the flashlight, and he knew that the snake was going to wiggle back, slither back under the door, and Erich said, the whole time this is happening, Baba, like that. Can you imagine? And but Erich waited until the snake was outside the room, and then he took his chapel or his sandal, and he killed the snake. And then he went into Baba. And Baba looked at him. He said, What's this? Where have you been? Didn't you hear me clap? And so Erich naturally explained to Baba, this is, snake was there and all that. And Baba said, no, you should have come. You should have let the snake go and come immediately. That was my order to you, and you should have obeyed. He dressed Erich down. Erich said, in telling the story, he said, what to do. He said, I did what I felt was right. I did what I felt I should do to protect Baba's body, even though doing so contradicted an order Baba had given me. And Baba, what did Baba do? He told me I was doing the wrong thing. And then this is what touched me the most. Erich looked at me and he said, when he was telling me, he looked at me and he said, and Charles, if it were to happen again, I would do the same thing. So he says, you see how it was? Even when we had direct orders, we had to use our best judgment. Erich said, we still had to examine our conscience and try to figure out what would please Baba. We were not always right. We made mistakes, but it was no different then than it is now. He said, you have to do your best. Follow your conscience. Thinking about it later, I realized, by that time in his life with Meher Baba, Erich, he knew in his conscience what Baba really wanted. Yeah. Not that he thought he was right all the time, but he knew, more than if somebody, including Baba himself, said, do something. No, he had to follow what he felt God wanted in himself. And one of the reasons he was so clear, in my view, is there was so very little of Erich left to get in the way. Because I think the more Baba strips away what's false in us, our false self, as it were, which is his job entirely, is that we don't do that. I mean, we think we do, we don't do anything. But the more he does that, the better, the more capacity then we have to hear his voice, the voice of our conscience, the guidance that Baba is giving within us. It's like Rumi says, when I am not. When I am not, I am. That's how it is. And it's like Elizabeth was this way, you see. I remember asking her, I don't remember what year, but yeah, I just spontaneously went in and asked her one day. I said, Auntie Boo, or that's what I called her, Elizabeth. I just want to ask you, I never asked her much. I wish I'd asked her more. We didn't have time for it. She was always busy working for the center in Baba, But somehow it occurred to me to ask her. I said, how do you know what Baba wants you to do every day? How do you know what Baba wants you to do? Oh, she said, she looked at me and she said, you see, well, she said, that's very interesting you ask. She said, you see, every morning when I wake up, I listen to Baba. I try to listen to Baba in silence. And then she twinkled. She had this wonderful way of twinkling when she was going to say, she said, well, he doesn't answer in so many words, in case I was expecting that. But, she said, the day becomes the answer. And that was such a revelation and for me, and a defining moment for me. I realized, yes, everything that we experience in the day, every person we meet, every event, is Baba speaking, telling us the answer, or what we should do. If we listen, he will answer in whatever happens to us. And we can trust that answer. She was very practical about this, Elizabeth. I mean, if someone had a problem, she didn't like the word problem. She said, well, let's call it a challenge. She said, you see, problems you have to work out. Let's just call it a challenge. I said, oh, all right, Elizabeth, and so, or Auntie Boo, and so forth. So here's the challenge. Maybe someone wrote a letter, or maybe a cable had come, something. And one of the first things she did was, because I think her father was like this, she would say, let me sleep on it. And she would put it under Baba's picture on the mantle, a letter, cable, or maybe she would, something else that would kind of be representative of that particular difficulty or question or whatever. And then the next morning, she would, and invariably when we saw her and, wondered what she thought of this particular issue, sometimes they're very difficult issues. And she would invariably say, it came to me last night. And then she'd give her advice. This great disciple never said, Baba spoke to me last night, and this is what I'm going to tell. No, she would never. It would be so unlike her. But it came to me last night. And then when she gave what she felt, it came with such power and authority and wisdom. And it was so simple. It was as though, oh, why didn't I think of that? Because she listened to Baba. And she once told me, she said, Charles, just do your best for him. Put him first, and then it doesn't matter. So you see, if she made a decision and it turned out to be a bad decision or wrong, she said, well, she never looked back. Why? She learned from it, but she didn't worry about it. Why? Because she did it for him. Before she did anything, she always said, this is for you, Baba. And it was like breathing for her, putting him first, right? So then what she did, yes, she's going to do something wrong or make a mistake, but you know what? She told me, she said, Charles, remember, there are no mistakes with Baba. It's his will. It's all his will. It's his will that you made the mistake, if you will. It's not a mistake. It's his will. But you should feel free of it by saying, this is whatever you want, Baba. I'm doing this for you, Baba. And then I found where Baba had said this in his own words, and he said, I don't know what year this was, but he said, neither praise nor blame should distract you from the path of your duty. Leave aside all other considerations. If your conscience tells you that you have discharged the duty properly, that is enough. Your conscience is the best judge. And then Baba added, it is human to err, and there must be mistakes. You can only do your best. Always be in time to look after your work personally. Do not leave anything to others. And then, if mistakes happen, they will be overlooked and pardoned. And then Baba added, even if I speak to you harshly about such mistakes, do not take what I say to heart. Do nothing even to please me or the world against the dictates of your own conscience. Unhesitatingly do what you think to be right and proper, despite the opposition of the world. Let your mind be as firm as a rock that resists strong blasts of wind from all sides. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, Charles.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Jai Baba, thank you.
And now, if you have something you want to ask or add, you're welcome to do so.
Rosie with her hand up.
Thank you.
Hi, Rosie.
Hi, Jai Baba, everybody. Hello, Charles.
Well,
Charles, I want to ask you a question, but I just want to preface it by saying what a joy it is to have your messages and talks on Zoom. It's been an absolute lifeline, I know for many, but certainly for me, to have them. I've sat and cried while you're talking, and I feel as if you also embody being transparent for Baba in the way you described Elizabeth and Kitty. It's very, 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 very moving. I met James several times in India, and it was a lovely connection. So that was lovely. And what I wanted to ask you, Charles, and I kind of think I know what you're going to say, but when you had this really difficult experience at the centre, was it difficult for you to forgive the people who'd been very hostile or opposing or critical? Did it take you time, even though you eventually saw it as Baba's will? Was it hard for you on a personal level to forgive that?
what a wonderful question. Yes, it was a very challenging, one in that situation, I was sort of a little blinded by my anger and sort of just, why was I so upset? Not, actually, I don't want to sound as though I didn't care for myself, but going to Myrtle Beach would have been very hard. I wasn't looking forward to it. It wasn't something I wanted to do this. I knew it would be terribly difficult. And I saw, how Elizabeth struggled with, what she said to me privately one time. She never talked about herself. I mean, almost, I could count on one hand in all my years 23 years with her. She just didn't do it. And she never talked about the past. She didn't speculate about the future. She lived in the now. She always said, Baba's in the now. But this one day was an exception. And some reason, it was not provoked by anything. And we were sitting together in Del Ruba by ourselves in the living room. And she said, Charles, I just think you should know. Everything I've ever tried to do for Baba, I've had great opposition. Elizabeth? God. So I knew it wouldn't be easy. if she felt that, what would I, and look what my mother suffered. I mean, my mother, people were really hard on my mother, even before this happened. So yes, I mean, I had anger, but it was not because of I'm not going to be able to be at the center. It was more like, well, if that's what Baba wants for me, yeah. But for the way they treated Jane and Christopher, who, oh, what a pure heart. He only was there for Baba, and he helped my mother through her illness and her death, and she treated him like a son, and he was, this was his spiritual mother, and so it was a blessing that he got to be there to do that for her. But boy, the two of them took the brunt. See, I was traveling for my work a lot during that time. They were there with the letters coming and the phone call or the rumors, and they had to be there to the brunt. Yeah. And so yes, I had a hard time forgiving that piece, because Jane had given her life to Baba. Yes, she was a difficult personality at times, and I get it, but Baba puts these people in this role, and then Baba asked for people to accept that he put them there. He did that about Norina. People had a hard time with Norina. Anyway, yes, so forgiveness, I struggled and struggled. And of course, I was rebuilding my awareness and understanding of Baba at the same time. This is Baba? No, wait, what happened here? I would never, I was blindsided. I shouldn't have been, probably, but I didn't realize people had these feelings and this capacity to be so hard on other people and cruel. And I hope Andy doesn't mind me quoting him, but at one point in all of this, he looked at me and said, "Charles, you didn't know this could happen in the Baba community?" I said, "No, I did not. No. Call me naive, right?" But so yes, forgiveness was tough, but what was harder than that? I did forgive, because I felt it would please Baba, and I did. It would have to be. It's like, what Erich would say to me when I said, "Erich, I'm not ready." He said about surrender and this, surrender that, and I would say, "I'm not sure I'm ready to do that." And he said to me, "Charles, just do it." And I said, "What do you mean? Just do it, surrender now." I said, "All right." And then tomorrow, do it again. The next day, do it again. And then it will become but natural. So that's how I treated for the forgiveness part of this. I did it. But, next day I get up and I'm angry again, did it again. And then finally but then I discovered that what Baba says is so true in the everything and the nothing. He says, it is easy to forgive, but very difficult to forget. That, Baba says, that is the real challenge. Forget, yeah, you can do, but to forget, and that took me much longer. Now, I don't remember. If you ask me, I can tell you things, but I don't remember how I felt about this. These people or this person or that person. I actually feel I love fine. Honestly, I don't, and I don't. So the forget part took me a lot longer, and I think it's much more difficult, because that means that I'm really letting go. If I don't hold on, why did they do this? And why? I don't feel that anymore at all. In fact, I think we all benefited from it. Baba's grace is there. In fact, I'll go further. I hope this doesn't sound strange, but I feel as though Baba gave us the easiest role. And I feel for people who, had to go through such, pain themselves in the wider Baba community about what they did. And that wasn't right, that they also had to suffer. But I'm just saying, I think I was grateful that the role I had, led me to where I am. Yeah.
Thank you, Charles. That's really helpful.
Thank you. We've got Anne and Fiona with their hand up.
Yeah, it's a question from me, Charles, Fiona. I'm here in Meribad with my son, and I was talking to him at lunchtime, saying I was coming to the Zoom, and he said, "What's it about?" And I read the quote to him about following your conscience. So really, it's a question from him through me, but also one that my mind was playing around. And it's kind of, I guess, an extreme example of what you were talking about earlier when you said, follow your conscience as long as you're not doing others harm. And my son, Deru, said to me, but Mum, what do you think about that? Because a jihadist might see his conscience as waging a holy war, and might commit atrocities feeling that he was waging a holy war according to his conscience.
Yeah.
So what about that?
Yeah, it's an excellent question because, religions historically, I'm not going to oversimplify it, but have sort of fought against liberty of conscience in a way because of this very problem. I mean, fought against letting it be too expansive. Quakers in the United States were considered one of the most dangerous religious movements of all time by many Protestant groups, because Quakers were in a sense saying, each person can hear the voice of God and have their own revelation, which was, of course, completely against the teachings of the Protestants and the Roman Catholics. So, yeah, it's been a struggle throughout history, and I feel that, in the United States, because we have no established religion, that was a great gift to us and to the world, that no religious authority is the final arbiter of what you can and can't do from your conscience. The law is. Whether the court likes the theology or not is irrelevant. We can believe anything we want to believe. Where the line is drawn for us legally and constitutionally is in what people do. And we try in the United States to draw that line as broadly as possible, so that people do all kinds of things that may offend other people. They may sacrifice small animals in rituals like the Santeria faith, or they may, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, refuse a blood transfusion when they're dying, or they may do things that offend many people. But they are free to do so. In fact, a lot of people look at us from abroad and think, man, you sure do allow a lot of things under liberty of conscience that we're not so sure we want to allow. And I understand that but that's religious liberty at its fullest if we do it right. But they may not harm other people. They may not disrupt the society in ways that are destructive. Now, where that line is difficult, because does that mean that if I'm a wedding cake baker, that I can refuse to bake a wedding for a same-sex wedding because of my Christian beliefs. That's been one of our court cases recently. Because then the harm is there, you see. This couple comes in, oh, we're having a wedding, we want a cake. Oh no, I can give you, I'll make you buns or whatever. I'm not going to make you a wedding cake because I can't. It's against my conscience. So we struggle with when harm is involved, and those are fairly trivial things about pharmacists or florists or foot bakers. It becomes much more serious in your son's example. But we certainly draw the line at violence. Conscience, no matter how much liberty of conscience, we don't allow that. Now, that's because we have a constitution, we have laws. I mean, religions can't very well broker that. So that's why this arrangement in liberty, I think, makes the most sense for the most people, for religions of all stripes, including people of no religion, protecting everyone from the excesses of conscience of others. And I think that kind of civic arrangement, to me, is maybe where the divine has pushed us. I can't say, maybe not. But in Iran, it's a theological answer in the end of what the powers that be decide God wants and does not want. And that's always going to be, that is always going to repress conscience by very definition. So Baha'is, as you know, many of you know, the leaders of the Baha'i movement are in jail in Iran today. They didn't do anything, they're just Baha'is. But the regime sees that, their conscience, as a threat to Islam. Well, you know, so there is no way to set up a system, religious system, Mayor Baba or anything else, a system that says, well, this is allowable, this is not allowable in society. There has to be ground rules for everyone, is what I'm saying. And, but no, my understanding of what Baba has given me is that he is not saying to us in these various things I've quoted today or these examples, he's not saying, do anything you want to harm people if that's what your conscience says. On the contrary, Baba, you know, no, Baba would clearly want us to draw that line. And more importantly, Baba would want us to shape our conscience to know that we must draw that line. And not, that's why I gave the example of Elizabeth not invoking Baba's authority, right? Unfortunately, as humans, we forget this quickly when the avatar comes after he leaves his body, and we begin speaking for him. And I'm sure we'll do it again. I think it's going to be harder to do this time with Meher Baba, even though there's some groups that want to do it now, and there's others that'll come up. It's harder because Baba built in so much in everything he's given that no, there is no authority. There is no authority. Nobody can speak for God. And nobody can, well, if that's, imagine if all religions had that. You know, the violence comes because people are told that they can't do what their conscience wants, or they're told that the conscience of the regime is such that we're going to eliminate you. I mean, the violence, the holy wars come from that conflict and claims of conscience. So what Baba is giving is, yeah, say it, what you feel, but say also, this is my interpretation, or this is what I feel. This is not from, I'm not saying this is what you should do, or this is what Baba wants for everybody. That's when the fight comes. That's what happened in Myrtle Beach. This is what Baba wants. Now, there are times when we're inevitably going to have a dispute, and that was one of them. The Sufi conflict and crisis was another, where Mandli felt funny they had to speak out. Well, that's very rare because Baba didn't like it. He didn't like it when people just invoked authority. But as Elizabeth said, sometimes on a spiritual principle, you must stand up, even if it does cause conflict. I see it's very, very rare. But never if it causes harm to someone physically or violence. Never. At least for Baba, I would say. I hope that speaks to what your son was asking. I don't know.
Yeah, but it was interesting because it led us to just briefly touch, for example, on Baba's discourse on violence and non-violence, where he sets out certain circumstances where violence is necessary for a higher purpose.
Yes.
So we just began to touch on that, and just wound up saying, let's just keep an open mind, because this is very, there's a lot to consider here, really.
Yes. There is a lot to consider, and I think that's exactly the point. That's the right way to put it. It's a lot to consider because all that we consider helps shape our conscience and expands our conscience to take into account what others believe and feel and act in ways that are not going to be harmful to others. If we really cultivate that, and Baba has given plenty of clues as to how to cultivate that. If we cultivate that, then we ourselves at least will not be in the position of making some sort of claim of conscience that would become violent or hurt other people. So it is completely up to us to keep cultivating it. I don't think I've arrived at what at a conscience that is, you know, inerrant. I could be wrong about, you know, anything and everything, but I trust Bob. That I do, and I trust that this journey to become closer and closer to what he wants is God's will. That God's will works out, and this is the larger answer that to your son. I think that if we were talking about what Baba has given us, what Baba has given us is that the larger answer is that it's already decided. And the will of God is what it is. We do nothing. We're in the dream of God, and we see that we choose this, we choose that. We don't. So what Baba is reminding us is, from his perspective, he's saying, what I will tell you is that that everything is his will, even those who do this or that, violence and so forth and so on. That's all part of what came in the original whim. It's his will, God's will. God doesn't will it as he goes along here. Oh, today I think I'll do this, I'll do that. That Baba says that isn't God's will. God's will is the cosmic reality. The way the daily life within that, the dream works, is the law of cause and effect, the law of karma, sanskaras, impressions. That's the mechanics of it. But the backdrop of it all is that it is. It is. So people, you know, no one is responsible. And this is a harsh thing for people to deal with, you know, in the mind. But Baba says, if you need to blame someone for the suffering in the world or your suffering, if you feel the need to blame me, because it all came out of me. And it all is, the will of God is to awaken me in you. When my grace descends, he says, you become me. So that's the will. The will is to awaken us. And we are all, as God, that is our will too, our true will. Our true will. So yeah, these questions of do I do this, do I do that, in the drama we struggle with. But we should, I think Baba wants us to always keep in the back of our mind, yeah, struggle, decide, but remember, I do nothing. Do your best, and if you think someone else is following their conscience in a wrong way, yeah, speak up. If your conscience says, oh, don't do that, that hurts people. Yes, speak up. But if they do it, it's the will of God. It was already there. That's how I take it from Baba. Paul, you have your hand up, I see.
Thank you, Charles. It's a beautiful story. And listening to you there, the Barber community was almost at a fork in the road at that point, because everything you say about your reaction, the rational reaction would have been to meet rejection with rejection, wouldn't it? You're at a tipping point, and was it your intuition, perhaps unknown to yourself at that point, that said the Barber community becomes an inclusive community, or actually becomes an exclusive community, depending on how I react to this? So it's beyond me, it's beyond these people, it's about the whole community and what this community will look like nearly 40 years later as we all talk together now.
Yes, I think that's a wonderful point, Paul, because the one at that moment in history, one could look at it, as some did, and say, all this change in sexual orientation issues and all these things, that's part of the Kali Yuga, which will be wiped away when Baba breaks his silence. All this terrible thing will be wiped away. It's one way of seeing what's happening. The other way would be, this is so great. Look what's happening. Women are being liberated for the first time in history, and LGBTQ people and African Americans. Look at what happened, and all the. And so another way of looking at it is, this is the avatar working, right? But that's very different ways of thinking. What Baba, I think, what I'm gathering from Baba, at least, is they're both right, in the sense that there's no right and there's no wrong. It just is. And it's like, I asked my Old Testament professor once, I said, well, why did some prophets get into the scriptures and other prophets were left out? And he says, well, this was written long after their time. And he said, the ones that got in were right. And the ones that were left out were wrong. So we all have our thing about, this is what Baba wants, this is what God wants. And then, but we don't know how it will unfold. The story will unfold. It may be, it will unfold in a completely different way than we think Baba wants, right? And someone else got it right. But no one gets it right, no one gets it wrong, because no one can do anything about it. That's the funny part. I mean, if I had protested more, petitioned, what could I have changed anything? No. It wasn't meant to be that I did anything different. Now looking back. In the moment, you have to do your best, but looking back, you say, well, the fact that I did what I did was the plan, God's will. Yeah. Same with the other people. So how can anybody be right or wrong, or responsible or not responsible for liberation or not liberation, when it's all written? What I'm saying? That the script is written. It's not for us. So I just feel like that gives us should give us a little to believe that anyway. I don't know that's true. I'm just telling you what Baba says, but to believe that gives us a little bit, I think, of freedom, not to be attached to what we think is right. You stand for it, you believe, but not to be attached, because who knows? I mean, I live in ignorance. I don't know anything. So if I was God realized, I would tell you that I know, but I don't. So we all should, as lovers of the beloved, are free, right? We should feel freedom about whatever happens. If it happens, it's Baba's will. If it happens the way we didn't anticipate, it's Baba's will. If Baba places me in a certain situation, it's if I'm in a certain situation, Baba's put me there. So that's the thing. We do nothing. The only thing Baba asks of us is that we do our best. Why? For love, not to change the outcome. If we want to change the outcome of what's going to happen to LGBTQ people, then, get God realized. You can't change that. All you can do is play your part with love as best you can, knowing that you have to put your heart into what you think is right. And at the same time, say to yourself, as though Erich told me, Baba said to them, do everything as though everything depends on your actions. And simultaneously remember, I do nothing. Why? Because that's what love is. Not because you're going to achieve a certain result by what you do, but because of your love for him and his love for you.
Thank you, Charles. Sorry, Charles, it's Fiona here. My conscience is telling me there's a curfew at NPR.
Oh, okay.
Very bad. So I'm going to have to leave now, and I can see there's a couple more hands up, even though we're a few minutes over, but I'm just going to leave it to all of you as to when you wrap up, and just say thank you for your wonderful way of expressing this aspect and relationship between conscience and intuition.
You're quite well. Very happy
lots of layers to explore there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona.
I'm going to love you and leave you all now.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you,
Thank you, Fiona. Bye.
Anne is probably going to have to drive me to NPR also. So great to see you all. Jai Baba.
Hey, Baba. We have Jane
So
with us
Ellie,
next.
Ellie, are you gonna?
I have a quick question.
Hold on. Oh, okay. I'm going to have to go, so I'll leave it for now.
No, go ahead.
Can I just say briefly, Charles, that was absolutely wonderful and refreshing. Thank you so much. And I think what you went through made a huge change. It also reminds me of dear Don Stevens, who wrote a book actually called Sexuality on the Spiritual Path, which has got a lot about Baba's whole relationship with homosexual people, or people of different people, and there's this whole thing with people of color and with women, and I just think he's done, and it's extraordinary the changes we're going through. Even if the world looks appalling, there are actually some amazing things happening. And the other question I was going to have was, how do we tell difference between our conscience or an intuition and a desire and a samskara? But I think you've answered that, and I think by saying it's okay to make mistakes is quite a relief, actually, because I do it all the time. And one can only do one's best. And
in fact, making a mistake may be exactly what one is meant to do. So, okay, Baba, now I see that that had to be. So by Baba saying nothing happens without my will, not a leaf falls, and so forth. Baba says this over and over again. He's freeing us not to worry about it. It doesn't matter. Do your best. And, and then if it seems like a mistake, it isn't. But if it seems like it, then say, all right, Baba, that's what it was meant to be. I did my best. But Erich always said, Charles, as long as you first say, Baba, this is for you, then whatever happens, happens. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Your will, Baba.
He will take it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Jai Baba, I have to go. Well, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jane.
you.
Rovi next.
Yes, hello. Charles, I just wanted to know what you thought, whether there was a direct correlation between subsuming the ego to awakening your conscience, and whether there is a direct sort of line between, less ego and awakening your conscience more and more on a daily basis, really thinking about it on a daily basis. Thank you.
Yes. I think there's a very direct line in the sense that Baba, in his work with us, is erasing the ego. Baba said to the people in Hyderabad in 1926, the close ones gathered, he says, "You know what's happening here? I'm poisoning you slowly every day. Yeah, I'm poisoning you, and then you'll die. You'll die the real death, eventually. That's what I'm doing here. That's why you're here." And so that's how it is. If we're holding on to him by his grace, I think holding on to his Dhamma is, Baba says that's most important. That's understanding has no meaning. Love has meaning. Obedience has more meaning. Holding on to my Dhamma has most meaning. And so if we hold on by his grace, then I mean, he will take away the egos when and how he chooses. I don't think we have anything much to do with it. And so yes, the ego gets worn away, whether we know it or not, if we're holding on. And that does open us up to hearing him. Because the less ego, the more ourself is free to speak and be heard. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, that's why I say Elizabeth and Kitty, they didn't think about it that much about, I mean, how should they do this or do that? Because it was so natural for them. Because Baba by that time had rubbed away so much of their false self. They didn't have time for anything else except him. I always used to think of Elizabeth growing up. I used to think, Auntie Boo, she kind of lives every day as though it's the only day of her life. It's funny. It's like this is my entire life is today. I mean, that's how she felt to her. No past, no future, just now. And I always sort of thought, boy, that's the way. I would love to live that way. And Baba says, live in the now, think of me, put me first, and you're free. You're free. Don't worry about anything. Baba says, if you, and I'm paraphrasing it, but if one is to focus on, oh, wow, this is my ego, and I'll get rid of this, I've got this sanskara. If I do this, I'll get more sanskaras. Baba says, no, Baba says, you're doing my job. Why are you doing my job? Your job. Remember me, love me more and more by loving others, making others happy, serving others. That's to love me, Baba says. Do that. Do that. That's your job. I'm giving you that. Do that. And let me take care of the sanskaras. That's my job, Baba says. I don't know why it is so challenging for people who love Baba sometimes to let Baba do his job. And Baba, this sanskara, this attachment and all that. He will deal with that. Because we're holding on to him, that's his job to do. That's how I feel.
Thank you, Charles.
Sue?
I'm just wondering, have I got my microphone on?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh,
Thank you.
First, to thank you so much, Charles. It is always a joy to listen to you. indeed Christopher last week talking about Avila. You've mentioned a number of the people who've inspired you greatly along the way, and I concur with everything you've said. I just wanted to share a little anecdote about Kitty, actually, because her life of example was probably one of the most profound for me. I was so fortunate in being in that massive care team in the last year of her life, but she was totally compos mentis, as you well know. And so I was able to learn and watch and observe, and felt like I was having a chance to witness somebody who was doing that wonderful thing of serving Barbara so perfectly. But the thing that really knocked me for six for a long time in terms of reflecting on what Barbara tries to show us through those great ones was one time she sat on the edge of the bed and we'd been talking, and she looked up and she said to me, it wasn't really a question to Sue Chapman, it was a question to Barbara rhetorically: have I loved him enough? And of course, it wasn't my place to answer that question, and I didn't attempt to. But what Barbara was showing me through this was a person of her stature who served him so perfectly for all those years is still in that place of not knowing, you know. And I think we can ask so many questions about how do we do this, how do we do that, and it isn't our place to really know. And for me to see, well, if Kitty doesn't know, then I don't need to worry about not knowing anything in the mind, because this game is not of the mind.
Yeah.
And it's a game of entrusting the heart as much as we conceivably can. And I feel so much that those ones of you, I include you in that wonderful group of people that had that opportunity to be with Barbara. Every time you come into our midst, she came into my midst, we have that opportunity to see his reflection and to be somehow trued back to that game of the heart. So thank you so very much for that. And my love to you and Christopher and Wendy and Buzz and everyone else.
Thank you, Sue.
Jay
That's
Barbara.
so beautiful that you
Thank you.
share that about Kitty. That it's so wonderful. And I love that story. And Wendy, if you haven't told her, that's so beautiful. She would love that, to hear that. And, you know, I mean, for me, hearing that makes me feel that one of the great gifts Baba gives us is the longing to love him more and to never be satisfied, you know. And and Mani said, you know, if you don't have that longing, she said, at least long to long. But he gives it. He gives people that, so they do feel, have I loved him enough? Have I served him enough? And so one wants to give more and more of oneself. Somebody asked him, and it may have been Jeff, asked Erich, you know, something like, after all these years, how do you feel different being with him? And I think that was the question. I hope I got it right. And Erich said, yeah, after all these years, he said, what do I feel? I feel more unworthy than ever. I feel more unworthy. And I said, well, yeah, that's right. The closer one gets naturally, we who are not are confronting our true self. And so naturally, everything left that is not, it just feels so limited and so weak. And yeah, so it all has to be burned away. But before it is, it's so painful to still have that vestige, you know. Have I done enough? Have I loved enough? Yeah. No one is more worthy in my experience of him than Erich, and no one has did more to love him every day than Kitty Davy.
Absolutely.
You know, of course she felt that way because Kitty was still there, you know, and she wanted to give everything, not keep anything back.
That's how she would have felt from the beginning, wouldn't it be? If you think about it, you know what she was said as
Yeah.
she was at the end. She was probably all along thinking that, which is a special, a great thought. Well, I'm getting tired. I don't know about anyone else, but it's been a wonderful afternoon, Charles. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you thank you all for giving me the opportunity and for being here. I feel very blessed to share Baba. And yeah, with people over the pond, it's so sort of odd, you know, because here we are, we're together, and yet I don't get to see the people in the UK or in France, and it's a real joy for me, yeah, to have this contact.
José, Baba, Charles, it's a joy for
Thank you.
We'd love
everybody.
to see you in person anytime you and Charles can come.
Yeah, whether it'll be in this body, I don't know. I'm getting old.
Aren't we all?
We all are.
Good
Yeah.
luck in your new home.
Akshay's not getting old. Ellie's not getting old. Now, many of you look kind of young, actually, come to think of it. Some of us are actually, but it doesn't matter. It's all, you know, we will always be with him in one body or another. Yeah.
It's been a lovely afternoon, Charles. Jai Baba.
Beautiful.
Lovely.
Jai Baba, everyone. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Precious.
Hope to see you again. Yes, very
you.
precious.
Thank you. Let's all hold him close. Or, yeah.
That's all we can do in these days.
Thank you, Ellie and Akshay.
Thank you, Akshay. Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you for this time that we've shared together. I know Charles has left us, but if anyone wants to stay just for a minute of silence with Baba, that would, you know, bring me joy at least. So anyone that feels inspired to stay for that last minute just with Baba. Jai Meher Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba.
Thank you, Ellie.
Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher
Meher
Baba
Baba.
ki
Jai.
jai.
Baba ki
Avatar Meher Baba
Baba
ki
Jai.
jai. Jai Baba.
Thank you, everyone.
Really.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jai Baba.
Che